I see some new faces, so just as a reminder for those of you who know, and an introduction for those of you who don't. My name is James DeMasi. I run Beatrice Institute. We are an ecumenical learning and research institute in Oakland that works primarily with the universities. But 8 to 10 times a year, we try to leverage the talent and strength of the university and or just dive into the intellectual and cultural tradition that we all share as Christians to build Christian culture here in Pittsburgh. And that's not something that has a sort of end game. It just happens, like it is this evening, with gathering, with lots of wine and with good food. So welcome. If this is your first event, please do get on our mailing list. This is the last event of the season, but we have already a good slate of events being planned for next year. So what this is going to look like is I have prepared questions to ask Kate and Casey, and I will interview them for about 30 minutes, I think, before I open up the floor for audience questions. So if you need something to jot a question down on as we're going along, there are cards over at the registration table. Otherwise, just hold on to your question. There will be an opportunity to ask. So let's just dive right in. First, I know from stalking Kate and Casey on their wonderful podcast, The Visitation Sessions, that one thing that has to be acknowledged, especially in reference to this documentary, is just how difficult it was to make. This seemed like a very vulnerable piece of art, a very sort of open and honest look at the last 20 years. So my first question is, could you talk a little bit about what makes telling this story so difficult, both personally but also in the climate today?
Sure. Is my mic on?
I think you guys will hear. Yeah.
I don't hear. Yeah, I think I'll preface that just by noting that a lot of people ask when I decided to make this documentary. I did direct it and produce it, but this documentary was definitely not my idea. I did not want to make this documentary. Casey wanted to make this documentary. We watched it. Casey was a high school teacher for 17 years, teaching religion and theology and teaching teenagers. And he felt like there was a lack, knowing my story so intimately, being my spouse. We were sitting together one night when he was doing class preparation, and we watched a short film called "I Lived on Parker Avenue."
Anybody seen that movie? I Lived on Parker Avenue.
It's good. It's a short documentary that was made about an adopted, someone who was adopted who went to meet his birth parents, and it was wonderful. It was from the perspective of the adoptive family and the adoptee.
Just real quick, if you're a high school teacher out there and your kids are spacing out in these waning weeks of high school, I recommend it's a 30-minute long movie. It's free on YouTube. I Lived on Parker Avenue. You know who you are.
It is good. It's 30 minutes, so it's a great class amount of time. But we watched it together, and then he turned to me and said, I think you need to do this. I think there's nothing out there. In all my years of teaching, there's no resource, there's no storytelling from the perspective of a person who has placed a child for adoption. So you get a lot of storytelling from people who have adopted or adoptees, but you don't get a lot of storytelling from women or men who have placed children for adoption. And there's a lot of really great reasons for that. You don't make the decision to place a child for adoption unless you are coming from a tremendous place of lack, whether that is a lack of assistance or sanity or sobriety. Or there was one woman in Upper Michigan, we showed this movie at a film festival, and she came up to me and said, I'm a birth mom. I had 2 sons, and then I lost my leg in a car accident. And I got pregnant, and I was a single mom, and I couldn't raise 3 boys with 1 leg. But women are coming from this place of extraordinary lack, which is often compounded once they've placed a child for adoption. So after that, you still don't necessarily have the education or resources or anything that would put you in a position to be the storyteller. The stories are told about you, or they're not told about you, because you very rarely hear anything about the women who make this decision. You hear that adoption is wonderful and that it's a good thing, which it is, and it really can be, but you don't hear the complexity. There's a lot of talk right now about voices that are missing from conversations. And I think that the voice of women who have placed children for adoption is one of those voices. And another piece of that is because there's so much shame around it. And that's one of the reasons it was hard to tell that story. Becoming pregnant when you're not planning to is shameful. And placing your child for adoption, although it's often lauded as a wonderful thing, it's kind of a Vietnam vet lauding where you're like, well, that's so wonderful, and now I never want to hear from you again. You know, like, I'll celebrate you for this one moment, but also, ooh, who does that? I would never do that. You know, a lot of people are like, wow, that's so brave, I could never do that, which is exactly how I felt before I made that decision. But when I did make that decision, the impact of it on my life was so great that it's always been a part of my identity. And another part of my identity has always been being an artist and being a storyteller. So whether I'm telling stories through writing or through music, storytelling has always been really important to me. So once Casey brought it up as something that we should think about doing, I ended up feeling like if I was going to tell the story, I needed to be in control of the story and to be telling the story in my own way. And I had zero background in film, although I did have some background in theater directing, as we were just discussing before that.
Yeah, we might get to a Winter's Tale. But I just, given what you said about being a storyteller and providing a voice in a space that, as you say at one point, is deafeningly silent. If you could, what would you say to your 21-year-old pregnant self right now?
I don't know. You know, I think I felt in what part of being pregnant? Or like, I think that the initial impact of being pregnant and something I wanted to capture in the film is that when you are in a place of unplanned pregnancy, you really do feel like your world has ended, and it has ended. I think adoption isn't something that can be brought up in the early phases. In the early phases of realizing you're pregnant and that, you know, the life that you thought you were going to live is not going to happen. The adjustment to that is just so great. You know, I think one of the reasons I wanted to make this film was that I'm now so far away from it. I've been able to see, you know, it took me over 20 years to see the way that God worked within that story. And one of the reasons I wanted to make the film like with this gift of time is because of the extraordinary beauty that God has been able to create and to write in this very complex, intricate manner that I never would have been able to imagine then. You know, I think for me, I was always very conscious of the fact that once I became pregnant, I was carrying a life within me, and that my primary role was to care for that life as best I could. And that's different for everyone. And I was also very intentional in making the movie. The movie is about adoption, but it's not a movie about trying to convince people that they should place a child for adoption. It's just a movie about when you're open to this life, you know, and to committing to care for this life in whatever way that you can best do. Really extraordinarily beautiful things can happen.
So, as you become a sort of voice in the space, you're probably going to get the question, have you thought about what you would tell young women in a similar place who are considering adoption as you reflect on your own experience, the grief? Would you lead with the principle of kids need two parents? I'm sorry, you know, or is it case by case?
It's very much case by case. And I think that's interesting.
I mean, you have gotten calls from people who are like, hey, I'm unexpectedly pregnant, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much case by case. It's interesting, I do say so clearly in the film that children need two parents. That quote is also from when I was still pregnant. I was planning on, you know, I do think that children benefit from having two parents. I think that my daughter, Bridget, benefited vastly from having two parents. But I don't think that there's no one size fits all scenario. I mean, I think for me, the most important thing, I think what I was saying initially about in that initial moment of darkness, I think we need to accompany women. And we need to honor that as pro-life people. I think we need to honor, you know, there's such a deep concern for the child that's vulnerable in the womb, which makes sense and is true. But we can't care for vulnerable children if we don't care for vulnerable mothers. And women who have just found out that they're pregnant are very vulnerable, and I think it's happening more. But like being able to accompany them in that initial fear and grief, with this sense of hopefulness that like there is still hope and there is still beauty, even though you are facing this feeling that's really dark. I think that crisis pregnancy centers are doing a better job with that, but I don't think that there's not a one size fits all. Adoption is not the only option or an easy option. I think for a while we were offering that as an abortion alternative in a certain way, and there's still kind of a mentality about adoption where it's like, well, it'll fix the problem, right? So you have a problem, you're a young woman and you weren't planning to get pregnant, now you're pregnant, and these other people have a problem, they wanted to have a child and they couldn't. So if you give your child to them, then you get to go back to being a woman who doesn't have a child, and then they have a child, and then everything it's a zero-sum game. And I think in that perspective, there is a lack of understanding that when you carry a child for 9 months and give birth to a child and greet that child, it's like every country music song is like, my life changed forever when I looked into my child's eyes. And that happens to women who place children for adoption too. Even if they never see their child. I know my grandmother was a nurse, and the best practices at that time were to just whisk the baby away so that you never saw your child, because it would be less challenging for you. But it is a great challenge. And I do think that one thing that's important is for the pro-life women movement to understand that women who have placed children for adoption do suffer. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and it can be a wonderful thing, and it was a wonderful thing in my life, particularly for my daughter. But it's interesting that we have so much of an understanding of post-abortive stress and syndrome and the grief that women experience post-abortion, and a lack of understanding that all of those same symptoms happen to women who have given birth and then placed their child. And we don't currently have a strong way of walking for them. There's not like a Rachel's Vineyard for women who have placed children for adoption. There aren't Catholic programs right now at all that walk with women who have placed children for adoption.
Yeah, this will connect a little bit. I am struck though. It's a good time to just talk about what a beautiful film it was. I was just so impressed the first time I watched it. You sent it to me, and the opening sequence, the drone fly over the waters before you get the voiceover that says, we're all formed in an inner sea. I just couldn't help but, I mean, they got and then as you move through all of the various landscapes and places in the U.S., and I mean, it's triumph. It was really, really well done. I also really appreciated the live music, but then also the various written word versus sort of spontaneous interview. And the inner sea kept coming up. I mean, obviously it becomes the governing metaphor, and I think maybe it'd be helpful for you to start, or to help us think through that metaphor, especially because by the end of the movie, you're on the further shore, right? And the inner sea has been compared to at least the vastness of your sorrow, looking over Lake Michigan, this landlocked sea, is there's a unity there, but I also get the sense that maybe there's a signal that if you say, I am Kate Stapleton, your identity is not, I am a woman who gave my child up for adoption at 21. And yet there is a kind of finality to the metaphor at the end. You're on the further shore. So I'm just wondering if you could flesh this out for us. Is this an ongoing process? What is this? What's your relationship to that metaphor as you think about it? And you think about your relationship to this grief that you've processed for 20 years, your ongoing relationship with Bridget, with Casey, with your children. I'm going to leave that open.
Sure. So there was a very specific, beautiful, the Great Lakes were real, I was standing on the edge of the Great Lakes when I contemplated placing my child for adoption. And I was standing on the edge of the Great Lakes and Lake Michigan right after she had been placed for adoption. And I did have a literal, actual circuit of the Great Lakes. So in part because of the school bus, because it can't go up hills. So we were doing these musical tours, and we decided to do a Great Lakes tour because we literally looked at a map after we realized we tried to go to DC, like General Braddock had the same problems. Like, we didn't fell any trees, but we had time to as we sat by the edge of the mountain cooling our heels. So we looked at a map and we're like, what's really flat but you could go forever?
Okay, so by map, are there any bicyclists here, people who cycle? Okay, I'm not, okay, all right, so they have elevation maps, they exist if you're trying to get from point A to point B, but you want to know how elevated. So I would use that over Google Maps to see like, can we do this? You know, so.
It has like as much power as a bicycle for going over hills. Probably less than some bicycles that I see in.
But it's glorious.
Yeah.
It's like a tandem bike. It's glorious, but you don't really want to be on it.
But I also love like the Great Lakes. My dad grew up on the shores of the Great Lakes, and so we've done a lot of projects that were folk songs, and so we kind of, because the bus couldn't go up hills, we're like, well, what about the folk songs, like the sailing songs of the Great Lakes? There are, we got this really great book called Windjammers about the sailing era on the Great Lakes, and started learning these really great sailing songs and traveling around the edges of the Great Lakes. So this is totally just a musical project, not an adoption project. And as we were traveling, I was like, gosh, we have to capture this. This is so beautiful. Like, it was crazy beautiful, but Casey's driving the bus, I'm taking care of the kids, like nursing babies, we're cooking for everyone. We have an entourage, but like, we're the nannies, and we're the performers, and we're the roadies, and we're the bus driver. We're like everything.
I knew it was bad when I was like driving with the bus and I had a GoPro and I'm like, I have to capture this. This is so beautiful.
Yeah, he's like trying to GoPro backwards while driving the bus, and I was like, we need a con reinforcements. Like, we need someone to capture some of this. So when I initially reached out to the amazing cinematographer who did the bulk of the work for this
Martin
movie.
Jernberg.
Right, Martin Jernberg, amazingly talented guy. We had this conversation about a theoretical documentary. Like, that was kind of one of our back burner projects. We have a lot of projects. But I saw a music video and was like, this guy would be able to capture the Great Lakes thing. Like, and we have no video. Like, I'm gonna just cold call him, this like Catholic young.
He did a music video. Sorry to interrupt. He did a music video for the people. Like, if you've ever been to Chipotle and had the like Mexican-y drink in those special machines, like it was
like strawberry, limeade, whatever.
It was invented by a Catholic couple. And that's their like secret golden egg.
So they have $1 bajillion now. They have scholarships if any of your kids are in school for not using cell phones, like
so you're supporting
at Franciscan.
Catholic
They're
Fly
doing amazing stuff. They're also musicians. They can afford to be because they have Chipotle juice money.
So they made a music video. Yeah, Chipotle juice money. So they made a music video and we were like.
Okay, yeah. So Hope and Justin made this music video. I saw it and I was like, I gotta find this videographer. I'm calling him. So I sent it. I just like sent him. I was like nursing a baby at midnight, sent him this message like, hey, we have this cool Great Lakes project, and then at the very bottom I was like, P.S. we're also thinking about doing an adoption documentary. So he calls me back and he was like, tell me more about this adoption documentary. I'm super interested. He was really invested. He had lost a brother and was the topic of grief and redemption and beauty was really intriguing to him. So he jumped on board, wanted to move ahead with it, and all of the pieces just for this whole movie fell into place at the right time. Because he showed up and was interested in making the documentary, we were able to do it. This is coming back to the Great Lakes. So we physically had him come along with us along the Great Lakes. And that was inspired by our tour of the year before that had inspired me to do the Great Lakes work, where I literally was the first day that we reached the edge of one of the Great Lakes. I went down to the shore, and Bridget was house sitting my house that summer. She was in college and she house sat for us. And she sent me a message that was like, hey, hope your tour is going great. The house is fine, the chickens are okay. We had chickens in the backyard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm standing on the furthest shore. I'm literally standing on the furthest shore. It really struck me. That was 21 years after. And I was standing on the furthest shore of a Great Lake in this completely, I could never have imagined that Bridget would be house sitting my house. But I was also, the more that we began to work on it, I loved the metaphor of it and the fact that the inner sea, the womb is an inner sea. We are all formed within the waters of an inner sea. And I was also reading about research about the way that when you're pregnant, like the mother's heartbeat during pregnancy sets the tempo of a child's life. Like they are so affected by that tempo. There's this science that's emerging. And so we're all formed, like that formation process, and motherhood was really important to me. So I think the Inner C was not just about my grief, but was also about my identity, that beyond my grief as an adoptive mother, it's my identity as a woman and as a mother. So both physically and internally, I was really drawn to the concept of the Inner C.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other striking thing about the film, and also just knowing you two personally. So this will be a two-parter. The first is thinking about, I mean, you have this experience where you have to give a child up for adoption, which is very traumatic, but eventually you meet a tall guy, and you have 6 children. How has it been different? You have children that you've had, that you've been able to raise, and was there a difference in that connection, or was there an echo, a resonance? Have you thought about these things? The second part of that is, you carried this grief for 20 years. You've traversed the sea, and Casey hasn't, in a lot of ways, been a part of at least the original wound. How has it affected your relationship with Casey? And that's also for you, Casey, looking in. I didn't know that you were the motive for the documentary.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll pass it over. I mean, a lot of people, women who place children for adoption, are often terrified to have children. Although I don't know if that makes them unusual, because it seems like everyone's terrified to have children right now. So, like, being terrified of children is kind of the thing.
The one time in human history is probably the most safe to
Yeah,
have
it's
a
bizarre.
child.
Like, usually it was like half and half chance, I might die, I might not, and now people are like, anyway. But I always knew that I wanted to, I'm the oldest of 9 children, I always knew that I wanted to be the mother of children. That was always important to me. I remember telling people when I was, a couple years after I had Bridget, I was like, I'm going to get married and have 6 children. I'm not really that organized. It worked out, but I wanted half a dozen children. For me, having children was super healing. I always wanted to be a mother, and it was a huge gift to be a mother. I've loved being a mother of children. I think carrying grief is a complicated thing, right? So it's not always the same. It's very cyclical. It'll hit you when you don't expect it. It'll hit you when you do expect it. Like on anniversaries, I've definitely gone through different periods. I think it was very submerged, or my grief about adoption was, I think if you'd asked me about it when, I had 3 or 4 kids, and Bridget was happily growing up in California, and my kids were happily growing up in Pittsburgh, I was like, yes, this happened and it worked out really well, which is true. Her showing up again and becoming, a huge part of our lives when she went to college, and kind of, I went from having kids who were like, oh yeah, there's this sibling, or my mom placed a child for adoption and she's in California with her happy family, which is great. But then when she showed up, which was also great, then it's like all of a sudden you have like another big sister that you didn't plan to have. Which, my younger kids don't know any life without her. She's always been around in their lives. But it's definitely, it's complex. Like there's just complexities about it. And I mean, I'm really happy to be, I think that working on it artistically in the past few years has been incredibly healing. For me, consistently throughout my life, art has been healing. And I think that's different based on who you are. Like God gives us all different gifts, and maybe it's engineering, maybe it's math. It's not for me. But like we heal through our gifts, right? Through what we're given, through what we love doing. So for me, working through it in theater and in music and in a film and writing about it has been really healing. Casey, I'd love to hear your answer about.
Well, because before this film was made, didn't you do a theater production?
Yes.
With Bridget?
Yeah.
And a bunch of people we know, like about.
You're still not answering his question though.
Can you rephrase
We're gonna get to 12th night.
It wasn't that.
I was just wondering. I mean, Kate's carried a grief that you shared in some sense, but also it comes from before your time in a lot of ways, and I'm wondering how it's influenced your relationship. I'll leave it there.
I think this whole project, this film, has been therapeutic I mean, I don't want to reduce it to just like, art therapy, but one reason why I wanted us to do it, like in addition to the high school students, because like she talked about the perspective of the birth mother, of the child who's adopted, the parents who adopt. Most people hadn't seen a perspective of a birth mother. Okay, so that was like one reason. But I was inspired in part by a Netflix documentary some years back. It was about some Chinese American girls who were all adopted in the U.S. and they like somehow connected, and the Netflix film crew followed them. And they're trying to find their like original Chinese moms. And the film crew went to China, and they met up with these ladies in these shops and whatever, and they like spit in a cup, the DNA test, and I think not a single one of them were the moms. But what I was struck by, and like as a teacher, you're always scouting for different ways to communicate some truth to students, because sometimes like stating the obvious isn't as attractive as telling a story. Like you could tell a kid to look both ways before crossing the street, or you could tell them the story of Billy who chased the ball in the street and who is now taking a dirt nap, and like you remember like whoa, so. But anyway, so these Chinese, these ladies talked about how years ago, at the same time period these girls were adopted, they brought their newborn baby to this bridge and just abandoned their child. And I was like, whoa! And the movie kind of just glossed over that and was like, well, it didn't find the mom. And I'm like, I want to know more about these ladies. This is insane.
And men, there were like men who were crying. There was one girl who looked exactly like a family. Like she looked like a long lost. Looked exactly like them, and it turned out to not be a genetic relative according to the test. And the father was heartbroken, just like devastated.
So I wanted to explore that aspect of the grief, but anyway, I think this movie's been healing, therapeutic in a lot of ways. I'm not recommending that everybody make a film about whatever they're like going through, but give it a shot.
How do you think that adoption has impacted our relationship?
No, I mean, I think it takes a special person to, I don't want to like misphrase things, but it takes a special person to be a stepfather or stepmother. Like we talk about St. Joseph, he was like, Father of the Year, St. Joseph is so amazing. Like, okay, fine. Also, wanted to quietly divorce the Virgin Mary. Like, just saying. Like, it's a little complicated. I don't think it's like made it difficult in the sense of, our house is like a Friends episode. Like Bridget literally comes over with her child.
So quick, nobody actually, a lot of you don't realize this, most of you. So a lot of people also are like, where's Bridget now? So Bridget did get married. Her husband is a med student. He was in the first year of med students at Duquesne. They live 2 blocks from us.
Her whole band lives like a block from us.
Our whole Acacia Wood and us, we're all like 4 blocks, and we're all members of this parish.
Sometimes they drive our kids to school. It's like,
so it's an ongoing.
Not every story's like this.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's.
But yeah, so there's a lot of Bridget had a child, so I have grandchild regularly. So now when I watch the movie and Casey's like, I think every time Bridget comes over, it's hard for you. I just think about like Casey walking into the house and like children screaming, and like I'm like, well, maybe the tables are turned now. But I mean, it's great, but it is like a Friends episode.
Yeah, so I have no more time, but I'm basically required now to ask about Shakespeare, because I'm a Shakespearean, and also I just found out this morning that you were in a 12th night, a Winter's Tale production with Bridget. And for those of you who don't know, one of Shakespeare's late plays, one of his last 4 romances. It's very complicated, it's very allegorical, it's magical, it features a black bear. But central to the story is a jealous husband who essentially causes his wife to die in childbirth, and then exposes the child, or has a servant expose the child to die. And then, sorry to give away for those who don't like spoilers, but the child comes back after 20 years, and it turns out that Hermione, the queen, is not dead, or maybe she was and she's resurrected. It's kind of...
So the queen is a statue. She's dead, but there's a statue of her, and when her long-lost daughter returns, she comes back to life. And in a stunning and insane act of complete hubris and nepotism, we did a production of The Winter's Tale before this movie in Steubenville, Ohio, with the director who's sitting right over there, Matt Walker. So we did a production of The Winter's Tale with me cast as the queen and Bridget cast as my daughter. So total psychological insanity. I was just writing about it a few months ago and I was like, who does that? Like, who is like that? I'm gonna walk through this. But yeah, it was wild. We also only had 4 rehearsals of doing a full Shakespeare play and lots of stories. But definitely a crazy psychological exercise to, I think it's super relevant. I mean, I think that in a sense, like, there is a part of you that's frozen when you lose a child, right? And when that child, like, comes of age and then returns, like, you have the opportunity to come back to life in a way. But I think but also it's a very psychologically vulnerable time. So this moment of reunion between an adoptee and an adoptive parent is really a complex moment.
Yeah, but what struck me as well is that it's a moment of eucatastrophe at the end. I mean, the figure Paulina has to say, "You must awake your faith," and then faith sort of makes possible this resurrection and reunion. But it's very sudden and dramatic and beautiful and crushing in all those ways. But your film doesn't have. What I noticed was that there's no one moment where you're like, I woke up and I was gobsmacked and I was given my daughter back. And in some ways, it's sort of in reflection or in reflecting on your life that it happened so gradually, right?
Right, and I intentionally, I mean, I didn't have that moment in real life, that sort of, but I also think most adoption films, that's the whole arc. The arc is like, this, you place a child and it's beautiful, but it's sad, but then you meet again and then that's the happy ending. And the guy that I was working with, who was an editor, who was really talented but very male, like I was directing it as a female and he wanted to edit it as a male, and he was like, let's just do, like, if it's an adoption story, it's like, I got pregnant, then I placed the child, then we meet back up again. And I was incredibly adamant about not approaching that way and approaching it in a way that portrayed my relationship to my family and her relationship to her family and, our relationship in not that way. And he kept saying, like, if you want it to get in festivals, this is the direction it has to go. You have to have this moment of reunion. That's like kind of a solution, right? Like, we want to have this like ending that's like that Hollywood ending, and I don't think that's the way life works.
Well, I appreciated it. I really appreciated the subtle, sort of understated the control that it required. I would like to open up the questions for the audience. Maybe I'll pass this or that microphone around, just speaking to the microphone because we are recording this, and I'm sure we won't be able to hear you.
So I was really struck by the moment you were talking about this wound that never heals. But, I mean, it heals or it's healing, so to speak. And I was just trying to put myself in that position, which is so hard to do because I am a guy and I don't have kids. But there has to be this, you were talking about I guess my question is that, I guess you've been walking through this journey with this kind of open wound that you talked about, this slowly healing and kind of like leading you towards something else. And then I'm assuming Bridget is also having this kind of like longing for something that's present but not completely present. But then you've leaned into that in a way that's creative. And I guess my question is that, do you have any insight or any kind of wisdom about how to approach people who have a completely different situation, but maybe it's something that is a wound or something that they've felt like at one point maybe they survived, but how do you lean into it in a way, and does art help that, I guess is the question.
I think so. I think that was my hope in the ending of the film is to make it a more universal, like we learn a lot through storytelling, like in an individual story. Hopefully we can take something greater from that. And, I don't want this to be just a film for people who have placed children for adoption, although it is that. But like we all experience wounds, right? And I think that it's easy to slam down doors and to try to shut things off, especially if you're male. I mean, there are men who have placed children for adoption. Like, there's lots of them. There's as many of them. You know, at one point, thinking about the lack of resources for birth parents, I was like, well, I guess there's just more adoptive parents. And then I was like, wait, I'm not good at math, but like mathematically, that's completely untrue. There are equal amounts of birth parents and adoptive parents. But I think for men in general, maybe it's easier to shut down emotions or shut down doors. I think I've experienced more pain because I've been open to love. But I think being open to love and to suffering, it's like, it's at the heart of our faith. It's what we're called to do. It's what Christ did for us. Like, and in opening ourselves up to love, we open ourselves up to suffering. So we often try to shut that out because then there's less suffering, but there's also less opportunity for grace. So that is a greater message. Art is one way that we can do that or convey that, but there's a lot of different ways that we can do that in our lives.
I think in some sense writers have done a disservice in saying never write yourself into the story as a rule when, hey, the category of autobiography exists. Okay, there's that. Or like the Confessions of St. Augustine, you might have heard of him. But also like, if you look at the inner sea, the gargantuan metaphor of sorrow and grief, but also the womb, it's also, if you zoom back a little bit, it's the opening of Genesis, like tohu vabohu, like there was chaos, there was sea. You know, that in the beginning there was chaos, and like the Holy Spirit breathed order into the water. So I think, you know, whatever you're going through. I mean, I was talking to Brother Ross earlier. Like Saint Junipero Serra, short little 5'5" Franciscan friar, you know, had a Spanish Castilian lisp and a limp, and he walked all the way from like California to Mexico City. Like, so if you got a limp, you can still do it. And I think that imbued his evangelization of the natives. So whatever wound, like he literally carried a wound, a visible, unmistakable wound, whereby people judged him before they even heard him speak. And I think, I don't know, like Andrew Jackson, I mean, he's not in the best social graces right now, but I mean, he also carried a wound from a dueling match, which I find fascinating. They say it was like a fish gill, it would like, or whatever. So you can do a lot with a wound. I'm not a doctor, it's just a medical advice. Anybody else have questions?
So thanks for being here. I know your film has been shown at different venues, so I'm curious what reaction you've received from the different venues that you've shown the film, whether they've been secular or religious, or kind of just give us a general sense of what the reactions you received.
That's a great question.
Yeah, so our goal for the first year of film promotion was to put it into secular film festivals. And our reasoning was, you know, we knew that it was a pro-life film. I always thought it had the ability to evangelize across lines. You know, I've spent, in my life as an artist or as a, you know, in the natural foods world, I spent a lot of time with secular people. And I really felt that secular people were not saying to each other, hey, honey, do you want to go home tonight and watch that new pro-life film and see if it changes our hearts?
Yeah.
Like, unless they were going to write a blog hit piece about it, that's the only possible reason that any pro-choice person ever is going to watch a pro-life film. But I was like, when I was making it, you know, I didn't want to shy away from being like a pro-life film. I knew it would be, because it is a pro-life story. But I was like, you know, you can evangelize through beauty. And so I felt like this story, the school bus, the music, this is something that can touch hearts across the board. So I started researching film festivals to understand how they worked, because I was like, where are liberal people? I mean, I know where they're on Butler Street. They're at the Rojas Cinema. And actually, the Rojas Cinema, before I made this, like when I was just talking about Great Lakes footage, the owner of the Rojas Cinema was like, if you guys make a film, I'll show it. Like, I'll put it out there. So I really wanted to start in the secular world, because I felt like I could build up, you know, if I could build up film laurels, then I could take it out to the secular world and then go into the pro-life world. Whereas if I started in the pro-life world, it would not go the other direction. It just doesn't work that way. They're not like, hottest new pro-life film now at our secular film festival. So we went straight into the heart of like super secular, like, you know, film about a gay cowboy going to his first gay bar.
And then it's our movie. And you're like, and people are like, very interesting.
That was the first festival we ever went to. That was like
Yeah.
in the same block, right? The last one that we ever went to was like a film, just endless murder.
I'm
like
glad, okay, so, yeah, so.
AK-47s,
Okay.
and then my film.
Yeah, well, because like, the film that was gonna play before ours was called The Postman, and I.
That's the AK-47.
Yeah, and they're like, hey, your wife's not here. Do you want your movie to play first or the movie from Afghanistan? I was like, luckily they put the violent one first. We didn't know it was violent.
Non-stop death.
Nonstop, just nonstop.
But it was
And then
about a
our-
father sacrificing for a child. So it was like,
It was about
I
a
could
that
see it.
Postman, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so it did really well on the festival circuit. My goal was to get into 4 festivals, to get 4 laurels. We were at 14. So I think we're at 14. We won Best Film at the Lake Effect Film Festival, Best New Filmmaker at the Fresh Coast Festival in Marquette, which was like an amazing festival, super, super liberal. So it was screening to like rooms full.
Kate, what is a film festival for those unfamiliar with jargon?
So a film festival, I didn't know either. I don't actually, I'm not that a big film buff, but film festivals are a really vibrant art scene right now. So there's film festivals in a lot of cities, there's better ones, worse ones, but it's blocks of films from all over the country or all over the world that are really vibrant. There's a lot of great storytelling happening at film festivals. There's a lot of great directors. There's some of the festivals we were at had like micro budget films of $250,000, $2 million, and my film, which I baked pies for to pay the cinematographer. At the Lawrenceville Farmers Market, if you bought my cinnamon rolls, you funded my film. But like our film did really well in completely super liberal audiences, which like people were really happy to see it, came up to me with tears in their eyes and were like, this is really beautiful. Like,
Yeah, one of the most lovely things was that after every showing, people would come up to Kate and just pour their hearts out and just be like, hey, I gave it my child for adoption 20 years ago, I've been holding it in. And so it's been a real, it's been an occasion of grace.
Abortion, like, yeah, I mean, it was really, it's not an attack film, it's an opening, and we're hoping to continue that. So year 1, our goal was to be in film festivals. We exceeded our goal. I'm headed to London in a week and a half to take it to London and the Moors in Dublin. And we're working with dioceses, and we're hoping to work with pregnancy centers and to get it in front of women who are in a vulnerable place, to get it into school. So our plans for the next couple of years are to really widen the scope of the film and open it up. And because in what we've encountered in the pro-life community, I think liberals loved the film. They were really struck by it and thought it was a message that really spoke to them. We have had a couple pro-life screenings where pro-lifers are like, wow, I never thought that a woman would feel sad after she placed a child for adoption. I have had that conversation like 27 times.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't really consider it till I met you, Kate. Like, I didn't really think about what women go through when they place or give up a child for adoption until I met you.
Right. Yeah, it's not something people talk about, which I totally understand. It's a very private thing, but I do think it's a helpful angle for the pro-life community as well to understand. When we're asking women to, we're often asking why women don't consider adoption, and I think we do need to have a whole picture of that and be able to walk with them if we're asking them to make that choice.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think you're such a beautiful representation of somebody who's been through this for other women who will think about it, but also the joy of your life now. And that, to me, is such a gift to all of us, to show that, through your pain, you had hope, and you trusted in your God, and you kept on going, and look at your life now. I mean, it's just beautiful. That's what I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to find out, at what moment did you find out that Bridget was also musically inclined? That had to be amazing for you to learn that. I was struck by the scene of you leaning up against the wall watching her play on the stage. It was like, wow, that had to be just an amazing thing.
That really was. That capture was one of my favorite moments that they caught. I had a conversation about music with her parents the first time we ever spoke. And they are just they've been incredibly supportive of all of their kids. They have 7 children. I think she was always musical. I didn't visit her until she was turning 4. And I, taught her like the most simple duet, which was like 2 notes, and then she played just that unendingly. Her mom was like, I wish you'd never taught her. So it was really neat to see her develop musically. And a lot of it's just been really fascinating. She was always such a great singer, but like it was also great to be a part of that process, right? So she had just started playing guitar when she moved here, and then left her guitar behind, like I talk about in the movie. So it's like, I guess she'd be, I don't know, a famous improv person. She was doing comedy, sketch, improv before she started doing music, but art has always been a way that we've really connected, especially since she has become, a young adult. So it's a gift to have that language to connect for sure.
But it really skyrocketed, right, when she went to Franciscan University of Steubenville.
Yeah.
And we lent her a guitar. And
yeah, because she did show up with no guitar. So she was kind of like, well, music is nice, but I'm going to not do it. I'll do whatever else. So, but connecting through theater and through music has been really an amazing thing for sure.
Just one more comment. I've seen her play with Brother Ross. I've seen her with the group singing down on the street there, with Brother Ross, and he's like blowing on her harmonica. I have a harmonica and I want to learn how to play. She's like, you can do it, it's so simple.
Yeah, join the group. They're always looking for new members. What is it, brother, son, sister, moon? Is that your folk group? You guys are you need another harmonica player. Yeah, I think it's time.
No, it's not really that hard.
And I will say, Bridget's band Acacia Wood just released a song last week called Roots, which she wrote. It was the first song of all of her songs that was specifically written about her relationship to her background. So I would look it up, Acacia Wood, Roots. It's a really beautiful song. She actually wrote it
in Wisconsin, where Kate's from. So now they're both doing dueling art forms of their own heritage.
But she visited, a couple years ago, she visited my family and wrote it in my teenage bedroom. So Acacia Wood, Roots, Roots, really beautiful song. Highly recommend.
Hi, and again, this is more of a statement than a question, but it was just, the movie showed such a vulnerability from you guys and Bridget and everybody in it that it had a beauty that was just coming through that was more beautiful than all these great landscapes we're seeing is from the people. And while it's a story about your adoption, like giving up your child for adoption, it's almost like the Lord came in and said, and this is what I can do when you trust me. It's like, look how much I can multiply love when it is given, even out of sacrifice. So it's just kind of cool how the movie's taken a life on its own by that surrender of like, hey, I'm going into the world, in this broken world, I'm gonna share my story. And it's just really, he's taken it and shown how he can multiply love when given.
I am so glad to hear you say that because while we were editing it, and I had no idea what I was doing, right? So I'm directing it, the editor is editing it, and
he's like several states away.
yeah, we were like going back and forth, but like we would have these conversations where we're like, how do we not screw this up? Like this is a great, God wrote this great story, like how do we not screw it up? We gotta get out of the way. We just wanna make sure it's good and get out of the way and tell the story. And I would come to Mass here and just like shove it on the altar, like mentally be like, I'm gonna set it there, like if you don't want this to happen, like it doesn't have to happen, but like my goal was to just like, God wrote this amazing story and my goal was to like, make it happen in a movie, but also get out of the way so that his story could be told. And I mean, he wrote an incredible story, but I'm glad we were able to make it come through. That was the goal.
But also there was a lot of Abraham ram wrestling, like, in Jen. So like, on several nights, if you've ever like made a film or like pressed it or like whatever, like compressed it takes a while, for the thing to get uploaded. And the editor, he was several states away, super nice guy, Ben Cruz, he'd be like, Kate, I did an alternate version, and I I think you're gonna like it. And he'd send it over, and I'd hear Kate screaming from the front porch. This happened like on over a dozen occasions, and she'd be like stretching her hair to its like follicles.
Yeah.
So she had to fight for her vision to be told, but I'm glad you got that, and not the hair follicle ripping. Yeah.
Well, thank you. One more round of applause for the Stapletons. I did want to announce, because Beatrice Institute is a community, I was told yesterday that one of our faculty fellows, Brent Robbins, passed away on Tuesday. He's been a very stalwart friend of the Institute since way before my time, and really contributed to the vision here. So please keep Brent Robbins and his wife April and his sons Dean and Dominic and his daughter-in-law Isabella in your prayers. We really, if you pay attention to our email list, we will send out details about the funeral and the wake. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to tear things into a lower register, but I do think it's important that we recall our fallen comrades here. But thank you again. Please enjoy the wine and I don't think there is any more food, but there is more wine and beer. We do have the hall till Brother Ross kicks us out. And we hope to see you in the fall. Thank you.